The airport passed every safety review. Then investigators discovered a report that was never supposed to be seen. Inside was a warning that changed the entire case. The airport was considered one of the safest transportation hubs in the region. Passenger numbers were growing. New terminals were opening. Airlines expanded operations year after year. Government officials praised the project. Industry experts pointed to it as a model of modern infrastructure. On paper, everything looked exceptional. The airport passed inspections. The airport passed audits. The airport received approval after approval. But years later, investigators discovered a report hidden deep inside airport archives. The document had been written months before a major operational failure. Inside were concerns that never appeared in public records. Concerns involving safety procedures, communication systems, and emergency response planning. The author of the report was not an outsider. He worked inside the Aviation Safety Department. For nearly 20 years, he had reviewed airport operations, emergency planning, and safety compliance. Colleagues described him as cautious and highly respected. He was not known for exaggerating risks. That is why his report immediately attracted attention. Several emergency procedures failed internal testing. Communication systems showed vulnerabilities. Response times exceeded recommended limits during drills. None of the problems guaranteed disaster, but together they created risk. The recommendation was simple: conduct a full safety review before expanding airport operations any further. Management acknowledged receiving the report. Years later, investigators searched for the original report. References to it appeared everywhere. Emails mentioned it. Meeting notes discussed it. Safety reviews referenced its conclusions. Yet the report itself could not be found. Investigators discovered copies of discussions, copies of summaries, copies of responses, but not the report itself. It was as if someone had removed the document while leaving behind evidence that it once existed. And that raised an uncomfortable question. Was the report lost, or was it hidden? The airport continued operating successfully for years. Passenger traffic increased. New routes were added. Revenue climbed. The longer nothing happened, the easier it became to believe the concerns had been exaggerated. But hidden inside maintenance records, investigators found a different story. Communication outages became more frequent. Emergency drills produced inconsistent results. Technical systems required repeated servicing. Individually, none of the issues appeared alarming. Together they formed a pattern investigators would later recognize immediately. The warning signs had been accumulating for years. The first serious warning did not come from an incident. It came from a routine emergency exercise. Airport personnel simulated a major operational disruption. The results were troubling. Several teams received incorrect information. Response times exceeded expectations. Critical messages were delayed. The problems were documented. Recommendations were submitted. Additional reviews were requested. Years later, investigators discovered something remarkable. Many of the issues identified during the exercise matched concerns described inside the missing report almost exactly. The same weaknesses, the same unanswered questions, the same warning, and once again, nobody. Several months before the incident, a former operations manager sent a letter to a national aviation regulator. The document described concerns that had never been fully addressed: emergency communication failures, delayed response coordination, technical vulnerabilities inside critical airport systems. The regulator acknowledged receiving the letter. Then the trail went cold. Years later, investigators searched for evidence of follow-up action. They found almost nothing. No major review, no independent audit, no public response. The warning entered the system, then disappeared inside it. Yet fragments of the correspondence survived, and when investigators compared them, the airport continued expanding. Passenger traffic increased every year. Additional airlines arrived. New routes opened. Terminals became busier. Management celebrated record growth. But behind the scenes, technical staff noticed recurring problems. Communication systems required repeated maintenance. Emergency drills produced inconsistent results. Equipment outages became more common. Each issue appeared manageable. Each issue received a temporary solution. Yet no one seemed willing to stop and examine the larger picture. Years later, investigators reviewing thousands of records noticed something obvious. The airport was not facing. Then came the review that should have changed everything. A team of outside specialists evaluated airport operations, emergency procedures, and communication systems. Their findings were serious. Several critical vulnerabilities remained unresolved. Additional testing was recommended. Expansion should slow until corrective measures were completed. The recommendation moved through multiple departments: operations, finance, management, government oversight. Everyone understood what delays would mean: higher costs, public questions, operational disruptions. Over time the language changed. Urgent recommendations became observations. The day of the incident began like any other. Passengers moved through terminals. Flights departed on schedule. Air traffic controllers followed normal procedures. Nothing appeared unusual. Then a series of technical problems began affecting critical airport systems. At first, operators believed it was a routine malfunction. Minor outages happened occasionally, but this time, the situation continued escalating. Communication delays increased. Information moved slower than expected. Teams received conflicting updates. Emergency procedures began. Supervisors reviewed contingency plans. And within a short period, the investigation began almost immediately. Regulators collected records. Engineers reviewed technical systems. Airport staff were interviewed. Emergency procedures were analyzed. At first, attention focused on the immediate failure. What system failed first? Which communication broke down? What warning signs appeared before the event? But the deeper investigators looked, the more the case changed. The incident was not simply about technology, it was about decisions. Reports had existed, recommendations had existed, warnings had existed, and again, the most serious concerns had been delayed, softened or ignored. The investigation was no longer about a system failure, it was becoming a story about. Months into the investigation, an archivist made an unexpected discovery. Inside a forgotten storage room sat dozens of unopened airport archive boxes. Most contained routine paperwork, maintenance schedules, inspection reports, training records. But one box carried a classification code connected directly to airport safety operations. Inside were draft reports, internal correspondence and archived reviews. And among them sat the document investigators had spent months searching for. The original airport safety report. Not a summary, not a copy. The original report. Its pages revealed concerns far more serious than. When investigators placed the two reports side by side, the pattern became obvious. The original version described significant operational concerns. The approved version described manageable challenges. Entire paragraphs were missing. Technical conclusions had been rewritten. Recommendations had disappeared. No one knew exactly when the edits occurred, but somebody had changed the report before final decisions were made. The discovery transformed the investigation. This was no longer simply an airport incident. It was an information case. Who changed the report? Who approved the changes? Who benefited from continued expansion? Investigators interviewed The investigation never identified a single individual responsible, at least not officially. Instead, evidence pointed toward a chain of decisions, spread across multiple levels of the organization. One recommendation delayed, one concern downgraded, one review postponed, one report modified. Each decision seemed small on its own. Together, they changed the future of the airport. Investigators concluded that no single mistake caused the crisis. It was the accumulation of compromises, small decisions repeated over time, a culture where warnings became obstacles instead of information. And by the time after years of analysis, interviews and document reviews, investigators reached their conclusion. The incident was not caused by a single technical failure. The failure merely exposed conditions that had existed for years. Those conditions had been identified, documented, reported, and repeatedly underestimated. The buried report did not predict every detail of what happened, but it identified the same systems investigators later focused on. The concerns were real, the recommendations were reasonable, and earlier action could have significantly reduced the risks. Perhaps not prevented every consequence, but changed the outcome. Today, the original airport report remains one of the most important documents connected to the case, not because it predicted the future, not because it contained a shocking secret, but because it proved something investigators already feared. The warning existed, the evidence existed, the questions existed. Long before the incident, the report survived, the archive survived, the signatures survived. And together they revealed a truth more disturbing than any conspiracy. Most disasters do not begin with a failure. They begin with a warning. A warning that seems manageable. A warning that can wait until tomorrow. A warning that someone assumes